Today, we're diving into a literary cold case that's almost 200 years old. We're talking about a superstar author from the 1800s whose most daring experimental work just vanished. The big question is, why?
So meet John Galt. Back in the early 1800s, this guy was a huge deal. A literary giant in Scotland, right up there with the biggest names of his time. But here's the weird thing. While we still read his contemporaries, a whole chunk of Galt's most important novels basically disappeared off the face of the earth.
And that's the real mystery, isn't it? I mean, look, it's one thing for a book to go out of print. That happens. But for several novels from a best-selling author to become almost completely unknown for 2 centuries, something else is going on there. How does that even happen?
To crack this case, we've got to travel back in time. The literary world of the 1820s was a place with some very, very strict rules. And it seems like our guy John Galt was on a mission to break every single one of them.
First off, you have to get your head around Galt's incredible range. This man did not stay in his lane. He was jumping from these sweeping historical sagas to chilling gothic horror, and then he'd turn around and write some sharp political satire. He was just a creative force of nature who absolutely refused to be put in a box.
Okay, so to really understand the biggest hurdle Galt was up against, we need to talk about something called the triple-decker. Back in his day, this was everything. Publishers, libraries, readers, they all wanted these massive 3-volume novels. And why? Well, it was a business model. You could charge more money, and libraries loved them because they could loan out a single novel to 3 different people at once. It was the blockbuster formula of the 19th century.
But Galt, he saw things completely differently. He was all about shorter, tighter, single-volume novels. He thought it was just a better way to tell a story. But for the publishing industry, that was a huge risk. By doing this, he basically put himself on a collision course with the entire literary establishment.
All right, let's open up our first case file, Exhibit A. This is where we see Galt's rebellious streak in full swing, with a novel that played this absolutely brilliant trick on his readers.
The novel was called Glenfell. And get this, the subtitle was MacDonald's and Campbell's. So naturally, everyone expected this epic dramatic saga about feuding Scottish clans, right? Well, what they got was the complete opposite. It was a sharp, funny, modern comedy about mistaken identities, all set in the trendy high society of Edinburgh. He basically used a historical title as bait for a clever social satire.
And here is the craziest part. Glenfell was the prototype. It was the blueprint for the very style that would make him famous. All the ingredients for his future bestsellers were right there. And yet this foundational novel was so completely forgotten that for over 100 years, the only reason scholars even knew it existed was because of a French translation. The English original was just gone.
So if Glenfell was a clever bait-and-switch, our next piece of evidence, Exhibit B, which he published in the same year, was a straight-up literary hoax.
This one was called Andrew of Padua, and it was sold to the public as a translation of a work by a celebrated Italian author, a guy named Abate Furbo. Seemed legit, you know? Just another sophisticated European story for the English-speaking market.
But Galt, being Galt, couldn't help himself. He left a massive clue right there on the cover. Furbo, the supposed author's name, it's an Italian word. And you know what it means? Trickster. He was literally telling everyone, hey, I'm messing with you.
And this prank had layers. So, layer 1, there was no Abate Furbo. Galt made him up completely. Layer 2, the story itself is about a con artist, an unreliable narrator telling a story about another unreliable performer. It's like a hall of mirrors. But the deepest layer, the real punchline, the entire book was an allegory, a satirical takedown of his own frustrations with the gatekeepers in the London publishing world. It was one giant elaborate inside joke.
Okay, so just when you think you've got this guy figured out, he pulls another fast one. For our final exhibit, we see him ditch the comedy and satire for something much, much darker.
In 1825, he drops The Omen. And this was no Scottish comedy, no Italian prank. This was a haunting, psychological Gothic novel. I mean, a complete and total departure from the very thing that had made him a star.
And he totally nailed it. The book was so good, so powerful, that it got a rave review from the biggest literary celebrity on the planet at the time, Sir Walter Scott. Scott was blown away by its psychological depth and beautiful writing. By all accounts, it was a critical masterpiece.
But here's the catch. While a literary giant like Scott got it, the average reader was just
confused. They loved Galt for his funny, charming stories about Scottish life. They had no idea what to do with this dark, moody Gothic tale. And you see the problem, right? His greatest strength, his incredible versatility, was starting to become his biggest commercial weakness.
Okay, we've looked at the evidence. We have the comedy, the hoax, and the Gothic tale. Now it's time to put all the pieces together and solve the case of John Galt's vanishing novels.
Just look at this timeline. In the span of only 5 years, Galt pumps out 3 wildly different, incredibly experimental novels. The man was innovating at a breakneck speed, constantly pushing the envelope for himself and for his audience. This wasn't some author just cruising along. This was an artist firing on all cylinders.
So the verdict is pretty clear. First, he went against the market, pushing for short novels when the industry demanded huge ones. Second, because he was a creative chameleon, publishers and readers couldn't stick a neat label on him. And finally, his writing, the hoaxes, the satires, the genre bending was just way, way ahead of its time.
And that brings us to the most crucial point of all. Galt's work didn't disappear because it was bad. It didn't disappear because it failed. It disappeared because it was innovative. His willingness to experiment, to be different, was the very thing that led to his work getting lost.
Which really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If the work of a best-selling author like John Galt could get lost for 200 years just for being ahead of the curve, what other masterpieces are still out there, just hiding in plain sight, waiting for the rest of us to finally catch up?